Welcome to Charging Up Your Sales with StorEdge. Today we're going to be talking about adding more batteries to your sales process. We're going to go through this in kind of mainly two sections. We're going to talk about how to sell batteries, what techniques are working in the market today, and then Cameron will be joining us in a little bit to talk about how to install StorEdge and also looking at the LG Chem battery and connecting it to the StorEdge system. So again, Cameron Stewart, he's our energy storage apps engineer, local expert on setting up anything related to this product. Also joining me, we have a guest here, Skylar Hopkins from Dividend. Skylar, you want to say hi to everybody?
How are we doing, everybody?
All right, so he's going to be going over some of the financials and also some offering from Dividend. If you guys are interested in getting a loan product to cover your batteries, they have a great solution for you. And then my name is Mike Roderson, Director of Marketing at StorEdge. I'll be talking through the selling portion. So first, go back to 1999. Kind of like this story, it's a case study that a lot of us have looked at. If you're in Silicon Valley, you're very familiar with it. There was a company called Netflix. Back in 1999, they started up and they wanted to mail you a movie. At the time, everybody used VHS. And so you had a VHS player. You had to rewind it before you took it back to Blockbuster, if you remember those days. And they decided to mail DVDs. They were cheaper and more robust to mail, but at the time, nobody had DVDs. So this was an innovation for them to kind of leap forward back in 1999. Since then, they've adopted more of an online model. And, it's gone through a couple phases where it was a small part of their business. Today, it's a big part of their business. And if you had to guess how much revenue comes from mailing you a DVD versus streaming you online content, it's pretty remarkable. So this is a company in 1999 that was at the cutting edge of technology with DVDs, made a pivot in their business and went to streaming. And now streaming is, I don't know what that is, 90% of their revenue. So this is from Q4. They've got domestic streaming, international streaming, and that's where the bulk of the revenue comes in. So I think it's a good theme for us to think about. Solar's not unique as an industry. There are going to be times when we need to pivot as an industry. We believe that we're coming up on one of those times right now. The first sign is that the growth is slowing. So 2017 was the first decline in the residential market that we've observed in a very long time. We're used to kind of up and to the right growth. 2017, we saw it go down, and it looks like, according to Green Tech Media, we're going to be fairly flat for the next couple of years. So you're looking at a market with an estimated 350,000 installations expected this year and the next year. And pretty much all installers have a plan to grow their revenue. We talked about the flat market. We talked about the challenge that we're going through. So how do you win in that type of a market? We have a couple solutions for you. How do you win in a flat market? Hunker down, growth is for suckers. So these are the guys who are just going to, go down in their bunker and eat some canned corn for a while. Lowest cost wins, so we're just going to cut costs and not worry about it for a while. Technology wins, best value for customers. Marketing brand wins, and no one wins. So we're going to give you a little bit of time to fill that in. Okay, let me share the results with you so you know I'm not making anything up. It doesn't look like anyone's going to hunker down. We've got a couple people, maybe one or two, that have said hunker down. Lowest cost, that's what we're seeing in the marketplace. People are not trying to go and cut the lowest cost possible. It's technology that is what people are relying on. So technology wins, best value for customer. Obviously, marketing and brand. We love to hear that in the marketing department at SolarEdge as well. So thanks for those results. So that's what we're seeing. And yeah, we 100% agree. This is Gavin out in Australia selling the latest StorEdge and the LG Chem Resu for us at SolarEdge. And it's a growing market too. So we've got new technologies. That market is growing. So where solar is kind of capping out, we're seeing storage grow and give us good opportunities. Some of the advantages, I think this is pretty obvious for anyone who's looked at storage. If you're an installer and you're trying to go out and install solar systems and then connect batteries to them, obviously there's a higher ASP. We do believe that the time to pivot your business is now. And you're looking at higher ASPs, sometimes 30% higher, and depending on how big or small the system is, could be more than that. And for your sales team, this is higher commission. So a lot of the sales guys we've talked to are very excited about selling storage. The ones who figure it out are able to convert a significant percentage of their business, and we'll talk about those numbers in a little bit. to selling storage. And when they do that, obviously they're getting that bigger commission check. So they're fairly excited about that. Business owners are excited about it for the revenue. Some of the other advantages, high bill blowback. So the rates are changing. So we're living in California. We're broadcasting from Fremont, California. We're seeing time of use. And one of the characteristics of time of use, now that we've been living with it for a while, is where we used to go in and design a system, even 100% of the offset, 100% of the kilowatt offset. We'd say, hey, you're going to buy this much energy, or you bought this much energy last year from PG&E, so we're going to build a system this big. That's not offsetting 100% of the bill anymore, because what's happening is the time use rates are higher once the sun goes down. So you've got solar that's producing in the middle of the afternoon. That's not at the highest rate any longer. When people are buying electricity and they're spiking their afternoon usage, that's a higher rate. So 100% production doesn't offset 100% of the bill. So that's one surprise that customers are getting. And, the true up is another one. At the end of the year, we'll go through months and months with no bill for electricity anyway from our utilities. And then we have to pay a true up. And sometimes that true up can be a surprise. And A, people aren't expecting it. B, people forgot about it. Or C, it's because of this 100% offset issue, it's a number much higher than they're expecting. And so they're going online and they could leave negative reviews in that case. Storage is helpful in that it can kind of move your energy around a little bit from the midday to the high energy rate time, and helping you kind of avoid this high bill blowback phenomenon that we're seeing. Rate changes on the horizon. So a lot of markets, we started with net energy metering in the US, and a lot of markets kind of had buy it, sell it, same price. But now that's kind of less and less a phenomenon. We're seeing time of use, demand charges. On the plus side, we're seeing storage incentives. And so a lot of markets are changing. So pay attention, what your market is seeing today might be changing just in a matter of months. So, you might not be that far away from looking at a system where a battery is a much better option for your customers. The second thing here, upgradable systems. So, you could install everything you want except for the battery, and then do that later. It's going to be harder to get a system upgradable if you need to do that in 2 years. So, not only do you have to come and do the battery, you've got to work on the inverter, you got to work on wiring, and there's just other balance system components. And what you can do today, you can do the battery, you can do the whole entire system, or, if you want to, as a step down, you can look at just installing the system as upgrade ready or battery ready. So, okay, but how do you do that? I think it's pretty obvious what the benefits are, but how do you sell more? There are two strategies. You could either sell solar and then say, okay, here's your solar system. Now, wouldn't you like to buy a battery? And the second strategy is battery is the sale. So you go in and you say, our system is sold with a battery. That's how we do it. Obviously, there could be pros and cons to either of these. One is you kind of start with a low entry price and then kind of work the customer up. The second strategy, you're starting with kind of everything in there. You're allowing your company to differentiate. On the first strategy, on the upsell, about 5 to 7% adoption rate. We have numbers from Energy Sage now saying 7% is what they're seeing from their database. And this is in a market where incentives have actually been bigger. With the SGEP incentive, it's stepping down. ITC is still in place. There's no real confusion about that. There's been some pretty good guidance on that. So, nothing's really changing in the market, but you're seeing a very low adoption rate on this model. What's happening on the other end of things, when you fully integrate it, we're seeing adoption rates 30% up to 50%. And these are for large installers who are, this is not just a small cherry-picked case. These are for large cherry-picked cases. These are for large installers that are pushing a lot of batteries and doing a lot of volume. And so these are significant numbers where we're seeing adoption rates for solar being half their business. So that's pretty big deal. And what they're doing is they're essentially going in and they're saying, other solar systems that you're going to get from my competitor, it's a competitive situation, they're going to turn off when the grid goes off. That's not really good. What I provide you advanced technology that stays on when the grid goes down and provides you backup power. And so they're differentiating themselves as a company against the market that's not selling batteries. And so they're winning business and they're getting their adoption rate up on these batteries pretty high. Another note, that they're not always selling batteries. So they're not going in with an all or nothing strategy here. They're not saying, I'm going to sell you a battery or I'm going to lose the deal. They're saying, I'm going to sell you a battery And if they do get into a situation where the customer, it's just better for them to have a system without a battery, they'll offer that as well. So they're getting the battery up front. They're letting the customer know their system is differentiated, unique in the market, offers them values that other people can't provide. But if they get into a head-to-head situation, they can take that battery out and still compete in a head-to-head kind of environment without a battery. Some of the data that we talked about, Energy Sage, it has a couple of reports, really nice reports here. I've listed them on the bottom. They're free. You can go, you can download them. They're going to get your data, sure, but who doesn't at this point? So go ahead, get these reports. I highly recommend them. They're a great way to get a finger on the industry to understand and kind of gauge where things are going. Here are some of the numbers that come out of these reports, though. Most installers, so 2/3, 63%, are offering energy storage. So 2 out of 3 of us, we have it. It's in our portfolio. It's probably in our warehouse or in our trucks. We train our guys on how to do it. And then another high number, 74% of homeowners are interested. So 3 out of 4 are at least checking the block saying, sure, I'm kind of interested in seeing what that looks like. Okay. Very, very high numbers. The low number is only 14% of homeowners are even receiving quotes. So think about that gap, right? 14% of homeowners receiving quotes, 75% are interested. That's a 5x multiple. So right off the bat, if we did one thing different, all we have to do is we go in and we offer them a quote. So, part of the puzzle that's sort of falling in place for us to figure out why these guys who are offering batteries as an upfront sale are doing so much better is because they're quoting all of their customers with batteries. So they're going from 14% of guys getting quotes, they're going into that 74% scenario where they're quoting everybody who's interested with an option to go with a battery. And if you think about it for like the last 10 years, some of the conversations we've had, batteries were the competition for a lot of installers. We installed PV, we didn't have batteries. So if somebody else had a battery, that's the competition. We sold against it. We know how to sell against it. But now we're looking at an environment where everybody can now adopt batteries and offer it. So it's no longer the competition. It could be your offering. It could be why you're unique in the industry. Some other numbers just kind of in here to fill this out. 14% are getting quotes. Half of those guys are closing. So half of the people who get quotes are buying storage systems. So that's, there's your 50% number. If you're giving a quote to 100% of your database, 50% are closing with batteries, assuming that number holds true. Now you've just gone from a 7% to 50%. I mean, these are extreme examples, but the message is the opportunity is there. I mean, it's definitely there. It's there in the Energy Sage report, which looks at small to medium businesses. And then I'm putting Sunrun in here. They're a publicly traded company. They're the largest installer. If you combine their direct business and their SIS business, they see 20% adoption rate. So here's a company that's tripling the standard 7% adoption rate, going up to 20%. Large publicly traded. We're seeing the numbers at Energy Sage, small and medium businesses. So across the market, these strategies are working, and the numbers are there backing it up. Okay, some of us who haven't done batteries, maybe we're feeling a little bit uncomfortable. That's great. That's kind of what we want to do. So let's walk you through some of the economics. First of all, most homeowners don't get one bid. That's a minority of homeowners are getting one bid. A lot of us are getting 2 or 3, and people are shopping around. So you're in a situation where your bid is probably going to be one of 2 or 3 or maybe more bids to a homeowner. So those are the facts. You can see, even without batteries, if we just look at inverters, panels, racking, the basics, a variation in bid prices of around 25%. So again, this is the Energy Sage data. They have a large database of bids. They're looking at an average quote of $3.13 and an average system size of 8.7 kilowatts. So a $27,000 opportunity with a variance in pricing of basically $6,500 to $7,000, somewhere in there. That's not any batteries. There's nothing in there that makes these systems terribly unique. It's solar panels and inverters. It's the same things that we've been doing for years. Now, some panels may be more efficient, maybe a couple more watts. Okay, that's all it is. But that's enough to drive a variance in pricing of almost $7,000. Now, imagine if instead of that, my panel is 1% more efficient than your panel. If you go in and offer them a battery and have that same variance, and you're providing them backup power when the grid goes down, that's a much more powerful offering, we believe. So does it sell? So again, this is just looking at panels and inverters. The way Energy Sage buckets things is they have premium plus, premium, and then economy and standard, and you can kind of see the descriptions down here. That's not just a panel. That's a panel and inverter package. They blend it together. But what they're seeing is in general, customers prefer, and the likelihood to purchase is going up with premium plus and premium packages. So, it's not the case. And this was mentioned earlier. How do you compete in a tough market? The surveys were technology, and I think you guys are seeing the same market that Energy Sage is seeing. The premium packages, the higher technology, the more options wins. And so now we have an opportunity. We can redefine premium. So rather than my panel is 1% more efficient than your panel, this could be about batteries. And now you've changed the complete conversation that a homeowner is having. You're offering something that's unique and extremely powerful to them, something that rather than 1% more efficiency on a panel, you're giving them time use arbitrage. You're giving them demand charge management. You're giving them backup power. So this is an opportunity to really change the game. Another piece of it, tomorrow's battery price today. So if you go and you look at battery reports and analysis, everybody says battery prices are coming down. Okay, maybe. We're also seeing indications that battery prices might be going back up. So there have been two leaders in the market. Obviously, everybody's heard about LG Chem. They're one of the leaders in the market. They have an extremely good price on their battery. The other one on the market kind of set the stage for this is Tesla going public with some of their pricing on their Powerwall products. If you look beyond those two suppliers, there's a huge gap. And now all of a sudden prices are spiking. They're getting much higher. So the two leaders in terms of pricing are already there. And what these analysts are looking at when they draw a line that goes down over years and years is the average. So you're looking at the high price guys coming down. Maybe the low price guys come down too, but not by enough to offset the impacts that you get today with selling a battery today. So, two of the main ones, ITC and incentives. So ITC has a limited duration. Maybe it gets changed, maybe it doesn't. Politics is politics. But we know that, it probably won't be around forever. It might, but we don't know. But it could go away, right? So that's a risk for a homeowner. If they get in today and get solar today, they get ITC. If they wait 3 years for a battery, I don't know. Incentives are the same way. A lot of incentives are done on budgets. Once you run through the budget, that's it. Now you've got to vote in another budget. And so it incurs another risk. So ITC and incentives both have limited budgets and limited duration. So as StorEdge, we're not looking at this and expecting prices to go down significantly in the foreseeable future. They may go up. We don't know. But if you look and compare at the incentives that you can get today, we're looking at cost of battery with a backup. This is all the balance system. This is, everything kind of in it around $10,000. Now we know that prices vary, and we know that some prices are higher. We know that some prices we are actually seeing quoted lower than this. We're just picking 10,000. It's a nice round number. It's very easy for us to look at 10,000 and understand what that means. If you just look at that number and you look at the step 3 SGEP incentive, 35 cents a watt hour, you're looking at $3,250. You can take the ITC on the remainder of that, which is around $2,000. If you're in a market that doesn't have SGEP, you're actually getting the full ITC, $3,000. So you get an increase in your ITC because you don't have the SGEP there. If you look at the savings, in California, you can get half off on this. In markets without SGEP, you can get 30% off on this with no incentive. If you think of how far batteries would have to come down in pricing to give you this kind of an incentive 3 years from now, it's pretty significant. The batteries are about half of that upfront $10,000. They would have to come down more than half to give you a $3,000 benefit. So you're not, we're not expecting to see that drastic a change in the short term, at least for the leaders in terms of the battery pricing. So that's kind of the battery pricing in the upfront. I did want to talk about financing this a little bit. Actually, I don't want to talk about it. I want Skylar to talk about it. So let me introduce Skylar from Dividend. He's going to walk you through some of the financing options that are available.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Mike. I really appreciate it. Let me just first say, again, a big thank you to StorEdge and Mike for having us on. This is really great. We really appreciate the opportunity to kind of talk through it, get out there, and kind of get some feedback from everybody out there in the marketplace as well. A quick introduction for myself. My name is Skylar Hopkins. I'm one of our senior account directors here at Dividend Finance. We are a solar lender based here out of San Francisco, though we do have offices in Austin, Texas, San Diego, Baltimore, and coverage in over 28 states. Soon to be going into all 50 states with some national credit union products rolling out. Mike, you want to go to that first slide? We'll start talking about some of the basics here about dividend. Actually, obviously the focal point for us here today was to kind of talk specifically about our storage-related offering, but we did just want to kind of give you guys some background and some information about us if you were not familiar with dividend. We're a company that really prides ourselves on two things. One being really simple for you guys and your customers to understand, and also being really flexible. So we offer a no money down loan option for both PV only systems, obviously, and a storage integrated system as well. Some of the key pieces that I think we're going to emphasize today, you guys can see below. Some things that we really like to emphasize are that we are offering an instant credit decision through our online portal. Again, as we mentioned, our loan is a zero money down loan with a 16-month optional re-am period. I'm not sure what level of familiarity we have with solar-specific financing products on here, but I know we have the ability for you guys to do some comments here. So if you have some specific questions about the loan offering itself, please feel free to chime in, and Mike will kind of filter through those. We have no prepayment penalty on our loan, a really important thing that we like to emphasize for people. So if you're signing up for either a 12 or a 20-year term, which are the products we offer, and you want to pay off this loan in 2 years, you can totally do that. There is no penalty associated with that. We do not place any kind of lien against a borrower's home, and that loan is ultimately transferable if they do end up selling it. Obviously, we do try to give people the flexibility of rolling the cost of that system into their home sale, or if they want to just transfer the loan to the new owners, they can certainly do that. Some of the things that aren't on this slide, but we really like to emphasize here are we are a company that still offers a soft credit check. So for those of you who are, perhaps doing some canvassing or door knocking, and you're engaging the customer out there in the field, want to make sure that they feel comfortable being able to be evaluated without having to do a hard pull on their credit. That is a really big selling point for us. We have some flexible pricing structures. So again, with the idea of simplicity and flexibility in mind, we really have tried to create some offerings that will supplement and complement the way that you sell. So if you are selling really based on a lower payment and you want to have a lower interest rate, but perhaps a higher platform fee, we do have some structures like that versus perhaps some other contractors who like having a lower platform fee with a higher interest rate combination. That is an option there as well. We won't get a chance to kind of go into it today. We have some screenshots, but we do really like to emphasize our portal. We are a company that really kind of drives our business through our technology stack. And we have an integrated portal that allows you to very easily create a new lead, run that soft credit check on a customer, and then immediately put together a proposal and being able to show them some information to kind of close your deal. More than anything, again, just the plug here for Dividend, we really pride ourselves on being a partner. We really want to be here as a resource. So we don't want to just give you a rate sheet and have you go out there and have at it. We do a lot of trainings, webinars, ongoing support. I'm one of our account directors here to kind of support my accounts in a day-to-day fashion, and we're here to take those calls and help reps close deals while they're out there in the field. Let's go to the next slide, Mike. We'll talk a little bit more specifically about a storage-related feature here. To kind of piggyback on Mike's Netflix analogy, we do see a real transition here happening as we see more and more utilities introducing, time of use structures, flat demand charges, and more consumers being interested in battery backup. We obviously have seen an increased interest from the consumer in having a storage system attached to their PV. So what we've tried to do is create a structure that allows you to add that storage in a really easy way. When you go to do a deal in our system, if you look up in the top left of the slide here, adding storage onto the project is as simple as just telling us, hey, we're going to add an LG Chem. Here's the model number of the system that we're going to put on. We do have you put in the capacity of the battery. In this case, we've chosen to put in the useful life, even though it's a 9.8 kWh system, we've put in 9.3, tell us the total cost, and then just reflect that total cost in number 2 there where you give us your total financed amount. In this example, we have chosen, I think the total cost of this system before the battery was $26,900. We've added on that $10,000 battery system and then also incorporated the SGIP in, which again, as Mike mentioned, we use the step 3 number. So $350 a kilowatt hour. all in all, I think this is going to translate to that third piece you see there on the right. Our proposal is really straightforward, really simple. We try to give you guys all the kind of tools and resources right at your fingertips to help explain this to a consumer. Obviously, this is a really complex thing, and we really, again, want to try to make it simple and flexible to kind of complement the way that you guys sell. I think the main thing I would just echo of what Mike touched on is that simplicity of when it's all said and done. There are obviously a lot of variables to account here, but ultimately it's $1 a day, right? And that's I think the really big thing you can kind of come back to your customers to say, regardless of whatever your unique value proposition is to your consumer, you can say that, hey, you've got all the same benefits of going solar. You're going to be able to hedge against rising utility costs long term. You've also got a great backup solution here, and all it's going to cost you is $1 a day going forward. Mike, you want to hit next slide there? So yep, here's that comparison. We really wanted to kind of put these numbers out in front of you guys. So kind of walking from left to right here, you can see it with a PV only system, you're looking at $129 a month payment. And then we've also outlined two scenarios here where you're seeing a PV plus storage, one that includes the SGIP, obviously, for the folks in California, and one that does not. So as you guys can see there again, we've got that increase in the overall payment kind of reflected in those two scenarios. And again, that's going to bring you to that $1 a day, $1.50 a day translation.
Awesome. Thanks, Skylar.
You want to go next slide?
Yeah. So I'm just kind of adding that in right here, the numbers that Dividend's given us, Skylar's given us. So cost per month for a customer with and without battery, it's a $30 difference. So you're looking at just that, $1 a day. So that's pretty much it. We find that that's a really useful tool when communicating the expense of a battery to a homeowner. Now, you haven't talked about any values at all yet, but you've done a really good job of mitigating what that out-of-pocket's going to be for them. You're getting a system that's going to give them this advanced technology, going to give them battery functionality. It's $1 a day, $1.50 a day. So next question is basically, what do they get, right? And so when you guys registered for the webinar, we grabbed some data from you. We asked what's selling and what are the reasons customers are considering storage. Backup was by far number one. And then obviously self-consumption, time of use, demand charge, zero export. These are going to be market-driven characteristics. Backup by far is universal. So it's kind of the leading one. And so in recognizing that, that's primarily what you're going to be selling to the homeowners. When you look at backup support during a blackout, this is something we borrowed from the guys who sell generators. And so the guys who sell generators, they need to make an economic case for having a generator, having it sit there for years doing absolutely nothing, and then turning it on and running some backup loads with it. The great thing about these solar systems is they don't sit around doing nothing all day. They can do time of use daily. They can use demand charge daily. They can move your energy around and be multifunctional devices that stay alive and stay working throughout the system. And then when you need the backup power, they can be there to help you with that too. But this is a story from the generator sales guys. They look at the hidden cost of a blackout. I'm borrowing it from them. They're looking at refrigerators, lights, sump pumps. And the big thing about this, apart from the refrigerator, is you're living in your home. So a lot of times when you have a blackout, it's not just for a 30-minute period of time. Blackouts can last days. They can last weeks, like what we saw with the storms on the East Coast. You've got blackouts that are causing people to move. And they're no longer in their homes. They're having to pay hotel rates. They're not able to provide security for their homes. There may be damage to the home, which prevents it from being secure. If you have a window, for example, that got smashed in by a tree branch, you're not able to be there and repair it. So the ability to have access to your home, to be living in your home, allows you to repair it, allows you to get to things quicker. That's where the sump pump damage comes in. Any flood damage, even as little as an inch, and you can see this is a government site, floodsmart.gov. Even as little as an inch of flood damage, if it sits there for a long enough period of time, can cause significant damage. So that's why we want to make sure we can run the smaller sump pumps and get the water out of the home and start repairing things. So that's really where the backup comes in. That'll be a big story on the East Coast, kind of balancing out things East Coast and with the incentives that we see on the West Coast. In time of use markets, so useful sketch, something to maybe just get out a notepad and draw for the homeowner. Just so that they understand energy production and energy usage and rate structures a little bit better. It's a fairly simple graph. What we're drawing here is the yellow ball of sunshine, right? So the sun's going to go up, the sun's going to come down. It's going to provide you this nice arc of solar production in the middle of the day, depending on clouds. Now you have energy usage. So most people, if you're working during the day, are going to use a little bit of energy in the morning. You're going to make your cup of coffee, make some breakfast, turn on some lights, and then you're gone for the day. And most of the day, your house is running on very minimal energy. And then that afternoon session comes in, you're cooking dinner, the kids are home, televisions, air conditioners in the summertime, everything's turning on. And so the bulk of your energy is used kind of in this afternoon after 4 p.m. So what's happening here is you're producing most of your energy at a time that you're not consuming it. You consume it offset from when you produce it, and the utility rates are starting to put higher charges on when you're using it and buying it from them and not producing it for yourself. So that's what this is about. What the battery allows you to do is take a little bit of that energy from solar production and put it into that time when you're going to use energy and you're not buying from the utility, you're buying from yourself from your own production. So that's kind of time of use. The same story is fairly true if you think of demand charge. If you think of demand charge, the peak of that blue line in the afternoon is when you're getting your demand charge. So getting that down and being able to kind of trim the top of that hill is going to be how you manage your demand charge. So in general storage, some of the benefits of our solution compared to some others in the market, it's an all-in-one solution. So there's one inverter on the side of the house. It's running your PV, it's running your battery. It's kind of coordinating and orchestrating everything to work, and it's reporting all that information to the World Wide Web. So you can see our monitoring app here. You've got stated charge of the battery, you've got PV production. This is at nighttime, so there's zero production. You can see what the house is consuming. You can see what you're getting from the grid, and it's laying all that out in a nice graphical rich format. So this system is also designed to automatically switch to battery backup. It's about 2 to 3 seconds, and you can switch over and you're running off a battery that's automatic. There's no switches. There's no nothing you've got to do, nothing the homeowner has to do. And as I mentioned before, on-grid applications are supported. So unlike a generator, which is going to sit there predominantly doing nothing for most of its life, our battery systems are integrated, they're live, they're functioning daily to try and lower your bills. So it's going to be a battery backup system that kind of tries to pay for itself, right? It's DC coupled, so we get into efficiencies and things. We won't go into too much detail on that, but we're taking the PV directly from the rooftop, DC direct current. We're putting that in the battery, which is also DC direct current. We're not switching it to AC and then switching it back to DC. We don't have to do any of those switching steps. So we're going to be getting that DC right into the battery. Another benefit of that is if we have a large system on the rooftop, large, let's say 10 kilowatt system, we have a 7.6 kilowatt inverter down on the ground level. We could have more DC production than we can convert to AC at a time. We have the battery as a reservoir that we can take extra DC energy and put it into the battery. So we can kind of take the clipping that you would have seen from that and store it in the battery and not have the clipping. So another benefit of DC. All of this, as I mentioned before, integrates with the StorEdge monitoring platform. And again, we're partnering with LG Chem with their Resu 10H battery, one of the leading batteries on the market right now, extremely attractive in terms of pricing. So kind of to sum up on here with the main points to discuss with the homeowners, you want to focus with why your solution is different, right? Other PV systems, they turn off when the grid goes down. The reason why you want to buy a PV system from us is ours keeps the lights on for you in the event of a blackout, right? So that's your primary reason. We mentioned that before. Backup is the number one reason why people are interested in storage. It's universal across all the states. So it's one of those value propositions that can carry out. How much does it cost? It's about $1 to $2 a day. And you saw that through the financing, and that's directly with the loan product. So if you're in a market with a good incentive, it's $1 a day. If you're in a market without that incentive, it's $1.50 a day. So you're looking at like $1.50 a day basically to buy this capability. And then it also gives you control over that energy production, and it's going to allow you to try and pay for itself is what it's going to try and do. It's going to use time of use or some other economic driver to try and generate enough value to pay for itself as a backup function. All right, so I'm going to switch over here to Cameron. Cameron, you on?
Yeah, can you guys hear me okay?
Yep, I got you.
Right on. So I think just I'm gonna make this really quick, as quick as I can, because I've got a lot of material to cover. My name is Cameron Stewart. I'm the energy storage apps engineer here at SolarEdge. So if you guys have any questions, put them in the chat box and we'll get to them as we can. Why don't you go ahead and go to the next slide, Mike?
Mm-hmm. You have control, so I think try. Yep, there you go.
Perfect. Okay, great. So just to recap, installing a SolarEdge StorEdge inverter with batteries is easy as 1, 2, 3. Now 4. Before it was 1, 2 was our inverter and optimizers, and then 3 was our awesome monitoring platform, and now 4 is just adding the battery bank. So we have partnered with LG Chem and their Resu10H, and so that's the battery that I'm going to be talking to today. There's just minimal added components. So depending on what your applications are, you may not need all of the components here, but the go-to-market strategy, I think, is to sell everything. So we have our StorEdge inverter, which is a 7.6 kilowatt AC inverter, also available as a 3.8 kilowatt AC inverter with our StorEdge interface connection unit. So that's the DC disconnect on the bottom of the inverter, and it's got a whole bunch of connection points for the battery, for the SolarEdge electricity meter, which brings me to the next item. This is a consumption meter that measures energy coming and going to and from the home. The auto transformer, you only need that if you're planning on doing backup power. So if you're not planning on doing backup at all, you're only doing time of use arbitrage or demand shaving or stuff like that, then you don't need the auto transformer. But if we were looking at the polls and everything that Mike just told us, backup is still one of the largest things that drives and motivates homeowners to buy batteries. So just buy the auto transformer and we can create a backup load center and install that. And I'll show you guys how to do that. And then the battery pack, of course, we need the battery pack. So it's about a 10 kilowatt hour battery with the LG Chem Resu10H, and we'll get into more specs in a minute. All right, so here's the StorEdge inverter. So again, I said it's a 3.8 kilowatt inverter or a 7.6 kilowatt AC, and that's when it's connected to the grid. However, when both inverters are in backup mode, they can have a continuous discharge of 5 kilowatts. They also support a surge of 6.6 kilowatts. So as you can see, the 3.8 kilowatt StorEdge inverter operates like the 7.6 when it is in backup mode. You can install 1 or 2 batteries on these inverters that will discharge the battery consecutively. So you won't get more inrush power, but you'll just get a larger fuel tank if you want to think about it that way. It is warranted for 12 years, and like I said, it's compatible with the Resu10H. We always recommend that you upgrade the inverter to the latest firmware version. So I usually just do a Google search of StorEdge firmware and it's the #1 result, but you feel free to download it. You can go to this website, https, solarEdge.com/us/storage/firmware, and you can get the latest firmware version. The Resu10H is actually a 9.8 kilowatt hour battery bank, and it has a depth of discharge of 95%, so meaning the usable energy is 9.3 kilowatt hours. Its continuous discharge is 5 kilowatts, which matches what StorEdge does, but the peak discharge is 7 kilowatts. So we're going to be limited by the inverter in this standpoint, so we're still limited to 6.6 kilowatts. It weighs 214 pounds, so it's pretty heavy, and make sure it's a team lift. It's rated to 14 degrees all the way up to 113 degrees Fahrenheit. It's a NEMA 3R enclosure, so if your environment suits, you should be able to install that outside, and it is warranted for 10 years. So let's talk a little bit about the components, and we'll get into, okay, if I want to do smart energy management, this is how I do it. So you're going to need of course, the SolarEdge optimizers and the StorEdge inverter with the battery pack and the consumption meter. Sorry. And then you can control the consumption meter from the cloud-based platform. So here's what the inside of the StorEdge connection unit looks like. And as you can see, there's a whole bunch of awesome, cool, fun things in here. One thing that is important to note that you can't very visibly or clearly see, that there is an actually auto transfer switch. So I get this question a lot of, okay, when the inverter goes into backup mode, does it disconnect from the grid? Absolutely. So it still adheres to UL 1741, where we immediately disconnect from the utility in the event of a grid outage. And then we revert using this auto transfer switch, we revert power to a backup load center. So a lot of questions about how do I create a backup load center. Basically, it's just a sub panel, and you're going to pull over some selected loads into the sub panel, and that's what you're going to back up. So the connection to from the battery to the inverter is fairly easy to complete. As you can see by this diagram, it's always tough to show, like you land your wire from there to here on a presentation, but I'm going to do my best. So as you can see, the battery very clearly identifies positive, negative, and ground, and that very clearly goes to the positive, negative, and grounding connections in the StorEdge inverter interconnection unit. The communication wires is the most tricky thing to do, but this is the format that you're going to see moving forward, where basically it's just 4 wires. So we recommend a twisted pair, a Belden or equivalent. A lot of people use Cat5. That's acceptable if you wanted to do that. I've seen people use, fire alarm wire. If you wanted to use that, fine. As long as it's 22 gauge twisted pair, you're going to be fine. So here's the wiring schematic. We're only going to be using an enable ground, enable high, enable low, and then enable shield. So basically, you just follow this wiring diagram. In some of the documentation that we supply, the quick installation guide shows you this exact diagram. So just follow it along, and this is where we connect it to the storage inverter. So these little squares up here are little push terminals. So you just use your flat blade screwdriver, push that open, put your conductor in, and then give it a little light tug test to make sure it's seated properly. The auto transformer, that's pretty heavy. It's a pretty solid chunk of copper, essentially, because transformers are copper. So it's misleading at how heavy it is. So I've seen a lot of guys accidentally drop it or not expect it to be as heavy as it is. So make sure you handle with care. It doesn't just mount this right next to the inverter. It doesn't need to be far away from the inverter, and it just has cooling clearances of 4 inches on either side. And then on the inside, there's line 1, line 2, neutral, and ground, and then as well as there's 2 temperature sensors, and this is just measuring the temperature inside the auto transformer. And I see that is most commonly forgotten installation step for the auto transformers, installing the temp sensors. So they go into this gray terminal block here at the top. It's very easy to miss, and then they route to this gray terminal block inside the storage connection unit. The electricity meter, I see a lot of people installing it next to the inverter. There's no need for that. The best place to install the StorEdge electricity meter is out next to the service entrance, or wherever the CTs need to go, because that's going to be your limiting factor for distance, is the CTs. So we sell the CTs separately, and basically it's a split core CT that wraps around the feeders of the service entrance and measures the magnetic field. And by the magnetic field, we can see how much current is coming and going from the home. So now we can see, okay, well, do I need to discharge the battery? Do I need to charge the battery? Do I need to curtail the inverter, depending on what your grid requirements are? So the consumption meter is not only a hugely valuable tool for measuring energy at the home, but I see a lot of installers starting to adopt it on non-storage installations, just so they have a reference where they can tell their homeowners, yeah, we installed our PV system, here's your electricity meter, we can see all the energy coming and going from the home, and I can see in June you started running your air conditioner at 65 degrees instead of 75 degrees like you did last year. And so your bill, of course, went up because you started using more energy. Or you installed that pool. I'm sure we've all had those scenarios where we've had angry customers. This is a good solution to help your homeowner understand their energy habits. So how do I install the StorEdge electricity meter? All I have to do is, again, wrap these CTs around the feeders of the service entrance. I'm going to connect a power supply and get some voltage sensors. And then if this meter is installed next to the service entrance, then I'm going to route RS-485 communication from the meter to the inverter. Now that has a maximum range of 1,000 meters or 3,000 feet. So that's why we want the SolarEdge electricity meter next to the service entrance. It just may happen that that's where your inverter is also installed. But I've seen instances where people are putting the electricity meter next to the inverter, and the inverter's in the garage on the other side of the house or in the basement, so far away from the service entrance, and then they ask, well, can I get extensions for my CTs? So it doesn't make sense to do it like that. Again, I can't stress this enough. Put the electricity meter next to the service entrance. So this is just kind of the information. I think Mike already covered a little bit of it. This is the information that you're going to gather from the electricity meter, and again, you're going to be able to see energy coming and going from the house and the time of day that happens, etc. So communication options, we've always allowed you to do Ethernet or Zigbee or cellular. Coming by default in StorEdge, communication is so important. Coming by default, we are installing a GSM cellular modem. So we're just going to say, okay, here's the modem, factory installed. All you got to do is turn on the inverter. So revenue grade options are also available. So if you are in a place that has SREX and you need some revenue grade metering, of course that option is available. It's factory installed, tested. It's a fantastic product, covered under by the warranty. So if you had a third party revenue grade meter that you needed that has its own warranty that's not associated to the solar system, well, this is. So our revenue grade meter is associated to the inverter, and it's got the same 12-year warranty, and there's no configuration required, so it saves a lot on labor and installation. Compliance, so of course we're rapid shutdown compliant. Of course we're 690.11 arc fault compliant. As far as rapid shutdown goes, we have to think about how is the system going to behave. So for rapid shutdown, we're going to see that the inverter needs to initiate the rapid shutdown. So if we just pull a meter or we turn off an AC switch, you guys are going to realize that the inverter is going to go to backup mode if the backup is enabled. So in doing this, you have to be aware that there's still going to be live, if the sun is up, there's live voltage on the roof, and then there's voltage coming out of the battery. So for firefighters and first responders, they're going to want to be able to turn off this DC disconnect, and that initiates rapid shutdown. So you just have to label it photovoltaic system equipped with a rapid shutdown device, and this is your rapid shutdown switch. Backup power. So as I said before, if you're going to do backup, you're going to need the battery pack, obviously the auto transformer, and then we're going to create a backed up loads panel. So again, this is just a sub panel, super easy to do. For the backup loads, we recommend nothing too big, nothing too taxing. And if we think about the capabilities of the inverter, we can discharge 5 kilowatts continuously, and it's about a 10 kilowatt hour battery. So that means you're only going to get 2 hours if you're discharging the full 5 kW. So what do we recommend? We recommend convenience items. We recommend, cost saving items. So the refrigerator, freezer, absolutely right. I think I heard Mike talk about this too. That only represents about 700 watts of operating with a 2.2 kilowatt surge. If you're on the East Coast and your power goes out during a hurricane, absolutely, you want to back up that sump pump. So we can back up to a 0.5 horsepower sump pump. The profile programming, this is the other subject that gets the most questions, like how do I program the StorEdge inverter? It's pretty simple to do. So let's just run through it real fast. You're gonna have to go into the power control menu, and if you want to enable backup, just press and hold the enter button, enter the password 123 and then you drop up to backup configuration and just make sure that's enabled. That's super easy. As far as programming maximize self-consumption or other things, that's going to go through the power control menu. So again, same password 123 go into the power control menu, go to energy manager, then energy control, enable it, and then you're going to put it into maximize self-consumption. So you can set a time of use profile using the inverter and an SD card. This is kind of a clunky way of setting a time of use profile, so I'm always going to recommend you set the time of use profile through the monitoring portal. And the reason for this is just a lot more intuitive to use. It's a lot easier to use. And if you make an update to the profile, it automatically updates all the inverters with that profile. So for example, if you're in PG&E territory and the time of use window changes from 5 to 8 to 4 to 8, then yeah, you want to update your profile. And if you just update the profile, any site associated with that profile will then have the update. So that's why I always recommend using the portal for that. And I have a couple of guides, links to the guides on how to use the portal to create those profiles. Storage control, you can also set up your backup reserve. And then what this does is it just tells us, I want to reserve a certain amount of space in my tank, in my battery pack for backup. So if I'm going to do time of use arbitrage, maybe I only use time of use for 70% of the battery, and then the other 30% is always reserved for backup. We can enable AC charging, and you can say, I want an AC charge limit as a percentage of the photovoltaics that's installed, or maybe some kilowatt hours, or you can disable it. So those are a couple of the menu options. And then battery off. We can turn the battery off during certain times of year. Maybe you have a snowbird and you don't want to exercise the battery during those days. You just want to leave it charged for 6 months. Feel free to do that. And good news is we have a video coming very soon where it shows you, walks you through step by step how to install this battery. Any questions you can about dividend? You can contact Skylar, I guess.
Yeah, just wanted to put Skylar's information up here. A lot of questions coming in that it sounds like people want to have some conversations on this financing, had some specific items they wanted to get to. The questions is obviously in general. We've been taking them the whole time, and I've got a good list here. So I'll just sort of work down the list for Cameron and Skylar. There might be a couple in here that I can get to. So Cameron, in terms of sizing a system, how large, well, maybe we could break this down. How many inverters can work on a system at this point in time?
So we have, with our newest firmware version, you can do up to 2 StorEdge inverters with up to 2 battery packs per inverter. So it's going to be like a combination of AC coupling and DC coupling.
Okay, and so that's 4 total batteries, 2 total inverters, each one 7,600, and then the DC size on each inverter?
7.6 kilowatts. So it would be a total of, what is that, 15.2?
Well, the DC size.
Oh, DC size. Yeah, so you can do a 135% DC to AC ratio. So that's about 10 kilowatts.
Okay, so I think something over 10 kilowatts each, I think is what you were saying. Well, let me flip to some of the dividend questions in and see if we can get Cameron back on here in a minute. Oh, there's a question about Oregon. Do you guys work in all markets? Are there any markets you don't serve, I guess specifically Oregon?
Yeah, we are currently in Oregon. If you actually go to the dividendsolar.com webpage, there is a where we are link right at the top that you can see all the states where we're currently active. And actually, we will be live in all 50 states here in May because we're going to begin working with some credit union partners who enable us to lend in all 50 states.
There's a question in here. You mentioned a soft credit check. They're saying, how soft is the soft credit check? I don't know if there's anything you can tell us on the webinar.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of questions around this because I think more and more finance companies are offering some kind of soft pull. To be clear, what we ask for is the last 4 digits of a customer's social security number up front, and we run a true soft check with Experian and TransUnion. The customer may get a notification that their credit has been pulled, and and that somebody's trying to check their credit, but there is no hard inquiry that would lower their score. So the clarification is that it will unequivocally not, under any circumstances, lower their score when we run our soft pull up front.
Okay. There's some questions in here about any additional fees, dealer fees, those types of things.
Yeah, I think, and that's again, I think something that we really try to just be clear about with transparency. We have one flat dealer fee, or what we call our platform fee, and that is the only thing that we charge. There are no additional fees that are charged directly to the consumer or anything like that. We are very transparent with every installer we have about what their fee is, and we leave it up to them to incorporate that into their total cost per watt when they're going to sell, a customer their system.
Okay, and then plenty of questions in here on, how do they work with you? What are the requirements for a company to start working with Dividend?
Yeah, I think that was really where, it was actually great. We ended on that slide with my name and phone number. We really wanted to make today about the storage piece and about our partnership here with SolarEdge. So if you've got specific questions about working with Dividend, please give that number a call. Again, we really take an active hand in really trying to be transparent about our offering. We'll give you a quick portal demo, show you exactly how it works, both storage and non-storage stuff. And we can talk more specifically through, what it would take to get you on board with us as a partner.
Okay. You'd mentioned a 20-year loan. Are there other durations that are available for this?
Yes, 20 to 12, and I'm not sure I actually emphasized it earlier, but one unique thing for us is that we will finance a battery on a 20-year loan. Many of our competitors will not offer a 20-year term because, as you guys noted earlier, the useful life is, 10 or 15 years. So we will fund a battery on a 20-year term. We also offer a 12-year term, and generally speaking, the interest rate for a 12-year loan is about a point lower than it is on a 20.
Okay. Got it.
Sorry about that, Mac. I kind of dropped out of there, but I'm back now.
No, Skylar fielded a couple questions, so I'll flip one to you. So since you're back with us, let's see. Well, this one's more of a market issue, and so we do have some information on this. So this is a question about markets with no time of use and markets with time of use. Are people selling on different value propositions? We got a couple questions on this, like San Diego time of use. And what we're seeing is, I don't know if it's strangely enough or to be expected, but backup is still the lead. So even in markets with time of use, even in markets with demand charge and these types of on-grid operations, the backup is the lead sell. It's probably the easiest thing for a homeowner to understand. And you lead with the statement that essentially other PV systems are going to turn off when the grid goes down. You're not going to have power in your home. With today's advanced technology, you will be able to do that. The system I sell you will run in the event of a blackout. So that's the one statement that they're putting out there to differentiate themselves differently right off the bat. And this is like in the 10-minute conversation, the pitch that they're going to have, in the first couple minutes with a homeowner. Now, they may get into time of use economics and on-grid economics as a way to sort of pay down that $1 a day for the customer, but they're leading the guys who are more successful, the guys that we talk to who are selling more batteries, are leading mainly with the backup. Now, I'd say the one exception for that is Hawaii. Hawaii is pretty much everything is zero export now. And so economically speaking, your system will either curtail or you put it in a battery, and people are putting in the batteries, very high electricity rates there. So there is probably the one exception. But in general, for California, even with time of use, we're still seeing battery as the main driver for that. There's a question here on AC versus DC coupled. So I kind of stepped into this a little bit and talked a little bit about efficiency and how we're going to recover some of the clipping. I don't know if Cameron, you have some additional points on AC versus DC coupling for the batteries.
Yeah. So long story short, the reason we like DC coupling so much is the efficiency. And we can charge and discharge the battery at a higher efficiency than you can with AC coupling, because you have to go through 2 inversion processes. So historically, we started off back in the industry and in the 80s and 90s with DC coupling, because we would hook up 12-volt solar panels to 12-volt batteries, and that's how we did it. It was DC coupled. And then when we started getting a little bit smarter with our applications and having generators to charge our batteries if the solar wasn't cutting it and other things like that, then AC coupling kind of became king and the standard. But now we're starting to see this kind of paradigm shift back to DC coupling, because we're just so much better at it. It's so much more efficient, which is why we like DC coupling. So I always get asked, can I go back to legacy systems and install a StorEdge inverter with a battery bank and keep my old product that I used 10 years ago out there on site that's still working fine? Yeah, sure, why not? Some of your functionality may be limited, and in our new installation manual, we have a guide that helps you, identify what can be done. So you may not be able to, like for example, you may not be able to do backup mode with solar. You'll have backup mode with just the battery. And you may not be able to do time of use arbitrage, but you will be able to do maximize self-consumption. So some subtle nuances, but it does give you the ability to go out and talk to those customers and say, hey, this is what we can do with StorEdge.
And there's something about the how do you do the breakers, and is there any advantage on like just connecting it electrically? PV system with its own inverter. Now I've got to go to a main panel and find two 240 amp breakers.
Yes, and that is the toughest part. So yeah, you could in theory combine those into a 80 amp or a 60 amp breaker, I guess. But it becomes very difficult because now there are two backup sources, and you may have to do a line side tap. And then since you're changing the point of interconnection on the existing system, does that mean you have to get a new inspection? And there's a whole lot of subtle nuance that goes into those types of things. So it's it's tough. It can be done, but it's tough.
Are you seeing an increase in main panel upgrades when people do that?
With AC coupling, absolutely, absolutely. And like I said, you just have to account for the fact that the battery is also a backfitting source, and so is the solar inverter. So now you really can encroach upon that 120% rule of the rating of the bus very quickly.
Very cool. So this is a little bit different. We mentioned using time of use and then backup kind of at the same time. And the question is, how is that possible? How can you run two different applications, like have backup and time use running?
That's awesome. So time of use is a grid connected mode. And so when you're grid connected and you're on peak time, you're discharging the battery. Backup mode is only going to start being effective when the grid is disconnected. So the grid gets disconnected, we throw our auto transfer switch, now we're working in backup mode. And of course, this overrides all TOU settings, and we're just going to maximize the consumption of the battery. So we're only going to discharge it to meet home loads if solar isn't present. So just the reserve allows us to keep that a little bit extra in the tank. So if you wanted to think about it, it's kind of a multimodal inverter in which we can run time of use when grid connected and then run backup when not grid connected.
And this is the reserve that you were talking about here, backup reserves, how to set it up, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So you just go into the power control menu, energy manager, storage control, backup reserve, and then set a percentage.
And is there a percentage that you recommend?
Yeah, I recommend typically somewhere between 25 to 30. I generally don't recommend over 50%, and just for the reason we want to use this battery for smart energy management, and I want it to generate revenue for me when I am in non-peak mode or trying to demand shave or any of these other use cases for batteries, because backup, while it is an emotional investment, it's not a fiscal investment, I guess you could call it, right?
Yeah. Okay. Makes sense. Now, is there any sizing differences? Like, are you going to put more panels on a system that has a battery backup or that has a storage?
Yeah, so there's no size limitations other than the maximum 135% DC to AC ratio and the minimum of a 50% DC to AC ratio. But I always recommend, if you want to make sure that battery is getting charged, you kind of want a bigger DC to AC ratio. So I would push the 120, 125 and go up to 130, 135 with this. The good news is that with StorEdge, any energy that is being clipped automatically charges the battery. So there's no more lost energy due to clipping. That energy is recaptured in the battery. So that's kind of a cool feature that no one really talks about.
Okay. This is about the part numbers. Now, I think the part numbers you showed earlier look the same as our normal 7600A-US. Is there any uniqueness to the part number for the storage inverter?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the uniqueness is the USS, And so if you look at the part number, it'll say SE 7600A-USS, and that second S is the one that makes it StorEdge.
Okay.
And I suppose since we went to HD Wave, that you don't have a 7600A anymore. So, so any US 7600A USS should be fine.
Okay, no, that's true. That makes sense. What about firmware updates? Like you mentioned the 323. Like how do they go in and update to that? Does that happen over the internet if it's connected?
Yep. So if you call into SolarEdge tech support, you can generally get us to update firmware remotely. I always recommend it's just a lot easier when you're in the neighborhood. I mean, if you got an inverter out there, you don't have to stop by and update the firmware. Let's just set that first. Like, there's no reason for you to go update firmware at your existing fleet. However, for new installations, it's always recommend to upgrade to the latest firmware version. So you just do that using a micro SD card. So you download the firmware version to a micro SD. After the activation step, you're going to update firmware, and then you're going to pair your optimizers. It's pretty simple to do.
This question's about the backup sub panel. Feel like we needed a slide on that. Sorry for deleting that slide.
Whoops.
So what size is the 2-pole breaker feeding the backup sub panel?
So there's a 2-pole breaker in the StorEdge inverter. So we recommend no more than 25 amps per phase, and if you're going to protect it by a main circuit breaker, we say a 25 amp main circuit breaker in your backup load center is perfect. With that being said, that 2-pole breaker inside the StorEdge connection unit storage interface, there's been 2 versions. Our USSO version had like a 20 amp breaker in there, but our USS2 version has a 30 amp breaker. So it should be good to just use that.
Okay. And this is about the CTs and the energy meter. Is there a max distance between the two?
Between the CTs and the energy meter, yeah. So we never recommend. You can't extend the cable of the CT. So whatever the cable length of those CTs are, I want to say off the top, I would have to double check. I want to say off the top of my head, they're like 8 feet, but I'd have to double check.
Okay. Do you support off-grid?
That's a question we always get. Can I do off-grid? So the SolarEdge answer is no. We don't do off-grid. This is intended as a grid-connected battery, and that's how we want to use it. Does that mean that people haven't done off-grid? No, there's people that have done it. Puerto Rico is a great example. They suffered a lot of damage from the hurricanes, and StorEdge is going in there like hotcakes because it's an awesome product, and they're still in 20% on the island. There's still no grid connected, so they're finding ways to set up the inverter and to have it run as a quote unquote off-grid inverter. But in general, that's not recommended, and we always recommend it to be grid tied.
All right. In backup mode, can you run a well pump?
That's also the biggest one. So a well pump is a 3 horsepower pump typically, and that is just a huge load, and it has a lot of inrush current. And you saw that our maximum inrush is 6.6 kilowatts. And if you do the math, 6.6 kilowatts divided by 400, divided by 240 is going to be like 27 amps. So we're not going to be able to do anything quite that large. So a lot of people said, oh, I've got this variable speed in well pump that may not have as much inrush. I don't know. That's going to be up for you guys to decide. In general, I'm going to say no, can't do well pumps, but there's an asterisk there and a heavy sigh.
Back to the CTs. Where are they located? Are they on the lines to the inverter or the main lines going to the bus bar?
Yeah, so they're on the feeders to the service entrance. So the main lines going to the main breaker is where we want these CTs located, because we want to measure energy for the whole home. So if you put those CTs on the inverter output circuits, that just is a production meter at that point and does us no good. So we want to be able to measure energy for the whole home. So the CTs wrap around the feeders of the service entrance.
Okay. And with the consumption meter, if we're installing it by the main panel and the inverter is somewhere else, how does the data get from the meter to the inverter?
Yeah, using an RS-45 cable. So it's just a Cat5 cable running from the meter to the inverter. And like I said earlier, that has a range of 1,000 meters or 3,300 feet.
And is that electricity meter required for self-consumption mode?
Yes.
Okay. What voltage is the battery wired to?
So the battery is DC coupled, and so our optimizers fix the DC voltage at 350 volts for the standard inverters. However, with StorEdge, that operates at 400 volts. So the battery voltage nominal is 350 to 450, typically operating around 400. It has a DC boost stage in it, so I'll preemptively say that according to the NEC, the National Electrical Code 690.72-ish, I think, is batteries, and it says shall not have batteries more than 48 volts. So the internal voltage of the batteries is less than 48 volts, so we meet the requirements. It just has a DC boost stage inside the battery pack that gets it up to 400. So the benefit of this is now we're running just 10 gauge wire between the battery and the inverter, whereas previously, if you had done any battery installations before, you were running 2-aught or 4-aught cable from the batteries. So this saves a lot of cost and a lot of time.
Okay. Another one of your favorites. Why is the auto transformer required?
Auto transformer is only required for backup, and basically our inverter is a 240 volt output. So we need to be able to split that phase to a 12240. So that's what the auto transformer does, as well as it's a phase balancer. So if a refrigerator compressor kicks on and drags one of the phases down, we want to make sure that the inverter stays on in this scenario. So that's why you need it. It's not that expensive. It's very low cost, but it is vitally important to backup solutions.
Okay, so we obviously cannot get to all of them. We're going to have the last question right now, and then we'll let you guys go. We're a little bit over time, but I think Cameron did a great job of keeping us to an hour for the prepared remarks. So the last one, if the battery discharges at night, when the sun comes up the next day, will the system be able to recharge off the battery? Wait, will recharge the battery?
Yes. So let's say you drain your battery below, like the threshold, and you say, okay, my battery is completely dead. When the sun comes up, the inverter is going to try to start powering those loads that you have that are still on. And if they're still on, the inverter is going to trip off and say, nope, I don't have enough energy to power the consumed loads. So if you turn off those loads, then the excess energy just starts dumping into the battery, which is great. So you start charging the battery, and then when you have enough energy in the battery, then you turn the loads back on, and everything's great. So if you don't turn off your loads, what will happen is the inverter will just wait until it has enough energy to supply power to those loads. And when it does, it starts supplying power, and then any excess energy charges the battery.
All right. Well, thank you, Cameron. Thank you, Skylers. Another great webinar. What we're going to be doing now with the questions, obviously we didn't get to all of them. We're going to forward this to our outreach team, and so somebody will be in touch with you, try to get as many of these questions resolved as we can. So over the next 2 days, we'll be working on that, trying to make sure that everything gets answered for you, and that you don't have any more questions on StorEdge, and you're able to go out and sell it and be successful at boosting your revenue and boosting your commissions, and just all in all having a great time. So thanks, guys. And any last words?
No, none for me. Thank you so much for having me. Sorry about my technical difficulty today.
Didn't even
Yeah, I
notice.
would say the same here. Again, this is Skylar at Dividend. We really appreciate the time. Thanks so much. And if you have any questions, whether it's about storage or just in general working with us as a finance partner, please feel free to reach out. I look forward to hearing back from you guys.
Okay, thank you once again. Have an awesome time installing those solar systems. We'll talk to you guys in about a month. We got another cool product on the horizon.
Right on. Take it easy. Bye.